We're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to give people just a few minutes in case they're running late from the last meeting. So we'll go ahead and get started here. There's not a lot of super exciting changes this time around. I do want to re-talk about the facelift project. We are in phase 2, which I'm going to show you here, where all users will actually be opted in to using the new UI to start with. So when they start CET in 15.5, facelift will be on by default, and they can turn it off. At this point, if you haven't gotten started on updating to the design changes, we highly recommend it at this point because we are still planning in May to have it on permanently without the ability for users to turn it off again. On that, we just wanted to note that the migration documentation for the facelift changes is fully released at this point. And like I said, we're recommending that you adopt the new UI standards. Do give those a look. If you haven't seen them yet, they're at design.configura.com. So just go to that site at any point, and I'll drop it in the chat towards the end of the meeting here. And as I mentioned, in 16.0, the new UI will be on all the time without the ability for users to turn it off anymore. And I'll have to take your questions at the end. I actually can't see them. So let's keep going here. There have been a variety of migration changes in 15.5 for facelift. We've added a couple of new features for things like message lim and UI hints. There's changes listed throughout the migration guide. They are typically come with a link to, or sorry, they typically come with a mention that these changes are intended for the facelift project. So that is basically, you're going to find that throughout the whole guide. Take a look at those changes if you think you're going to be impacted by those. Next up, we're talking about core schemes and group schemes. I think the little banner from Zoom might be getting in the way of here, but in August 2023, we announced that we were going to, that core schemes and group schemes had reached their end of life and that we would be eventually getting rid of them. We are at that phase now, where it is time for them to go to CM unmaintained, which means if you are using one of these systems, you do have the ability to copy and paste the entire system for your purposes, for your needs, but we will not be maintaining them anymore, which means we won't be supporting them anymore as far as fixes or anything like that goes. Yeah, so that is what's going on with those. There is a bit of help on the Help Center. We actually have a migration to prop schemes guide that you can find in the Help Center. And there's actually a link to it right in the migration guide. So make sure you go ahead and click on that if you need it. Next up, we have some changes to COMs. If your extension is using COMs, that stands for Customer's Own Materials for something, you might be interested in these. Essentially, there are a lot of changes coming to COMs, the way that they're viewed, the fact that they can be saved individually for the user now, and that sort of thing. So there are some changes to those. Just keep an eye out for them. We don't anticipate there will be too much to do there, but there's always that random chance that somebody's doing something we weren't expecting. And the last interesting thing I had to note was actually a small but significant bug that has actually been around for a long time. If you tried to rebuild your core properties and had 0 or 1 item left, it wouldn't actually rebuild at all. Or it would actually rebuild in a way that there would be some odd behavior after the fact. So now what we're actually doing is fixing that issue. But if you generated some sort of workaround for it, you'll actually be negatively impacted by that. So that's the last one that I wanted to mention. Does anybody have questions? It looks like I did have a few people who came in late. Just a quick recap on what I think may be the most significant change here for those who did come in while I was actually presenting. We did have a change to where we're moving all of core schemes and group schemes to CM unmaintained at this point. So if you were using those, as we announced in 2023, they've reached their end of life. There is a guide on how to go through those. And one other note, for 15.5, the UI facelift changes will be on by default. And I'm going to put in the chat here actually where you can get a link to look at the design guidelines. Good question. Derek asks, are UI hints new to 15.5? Are they being updated? There is more options for them with more UI elements allowing for hints is the big change there. Good question. In the chat, I just dropped the location where you can find the UI facelift changes. And if you give me one more second here, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen for a second, and I'll actually get you. We are also starting to launch a design and developer experience newsletter. It's going to come out biannually, so twice a year, around migration time. There will be some reminders about the kinds of things we talked about in this meeting, and some other developer experience updates, as well as it'll be a great way for us to continue to inform you of changes to the design guidelines as they come up. Sammy asks, how important is it to adhere strictly to the UI guidelines? For example, we feel the header logo is too small. There are changes that are actually recommended, and there are things in the guidelines that are recommended at this point, and there are things that we are going to be requiring. I don't know off the top of my head if the header logo size is a required thing. I want to say not, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I can get back to you on that one. Derek asks, what will configure as approval process be for new UIs if there are requirements? That's a great question. I have not yet confirmed this, but I would imagine that at the moment, this is an honest guess, we'll be having those things be required as part of extension review. If there aren't any more questions, the next thing I wanted to mention is that on Monday, we'll have our first migration workshop. As I posted in developer news, things are a little different this year. We're going to do 2 migration workshops, a half hour each, one on Monday and then one 2 weeks from Monday. If you have any things you're running into, please feel free to bring those in to those sessions if you'd like. We did this partly to see if we can get a slightly larger crowd, kind of cross-sharing some information, or to understand what the needs of the community are a little bit better. So there's that. On top of that, the developer survey just went out this morning for this year, so I'm going to take a moment to shamelessly plug that. Please do take the survey if you can spare 15 minutes. We do use that to try to help with the future of what you guys need and what we can actually accomplish in the next year. And that's all I really have. Okay, thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you around. If you do have any questions about your migration issues, please feel free to reach out to dev support. Thanks.